The meatloaf was getting cold, but nobody seemed to notice. I carved another slice and placed it on Marlene's plate, watching her thumb dance across her phone screen for the third time in 10 minutes. Our daughters, Chloe and Ava, sat quietly picking at their food while their mother giggled at whatever message had just lit up her screen. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. So, I said, setting down the carving knife with deliberate precision, how was everyone's day? Chloe, 17 and sharp as a tack, looked up from her mashed potatoes. Dad, I got accepted to state, full scholarship for engineering. My chest swelled with pride. That's my girl, following in the old man's footsteps. Marlene barely glanced up. That's nice, honey. Ava, my 14-year-old sweetheart, tried to fill the awkward silence. Mom, who keeps texting you? Marlene's head snapped up, her cheeks flushing pink. Oh, just Brenda from the boutique. You know how she gets about inventory. I knew Brenda. She wasn't the type to send giggle-worthy texts about handbags and jewelry displays. But I kept my mouth shut and took another bite of meatloaf that tasted like cardboard. Actually, Marlene said, setting her phone down with a theatrical flourish, I have some news that might surprise everyone. The way she said it made my stomach clench. After 18 years of marriage, I knew that tone. It was the same voice she'd used when she'd maxed out our credit cards on her boutique's grand opening, or when she'd accidentally scratched my truck trying to park her BMW. I went to the doctor yesterday, she continued, her eyes sparkling with mischief. And well, I might be pregnant. Chloe's fork clattered against her plate. Ava's mouth fell open. I felt the red liquid drain from my face. Might be? I managed to croak. Marlene laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Well, the funny thing is, I'm not entirely sure who the father would be. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, my own heart hammering against my ribs. Mom, Chloe whispered, what do you mean? Oh, I'm just kidding. Marlene waved her hand dismissively. You should see your faces. Grant, you look like you've seen a ghost. But her eyes weren't laughing. They were calculating, watching my reaction like a scientist studying a lab rat. This wasn't a joke. This was a confession wrapped in comedy, a test to see how much I suspected. That's not funny, Marlene, I said quietly. Oh, come on. Where's your sense of humor? I was just trying to lighten the mood. Everyone's been so serious lately. Chloe pushed back from the table. May I be excused? I have homework. Me too, Ava mumbled, following her sister's lead. As the girls disappeared upstairs, Marlene finally put her phone face down on the table. You're being dramatic, Grant. It was just a joke. Was it? She met my gaze for exactly 3 seconds before looking away. Don't be ridiculous. But I wasn't being ridiculous. After 17 years as a civil engineer, I'd learned to read the structural integrity of things, buildings, bridges, and apparently marriages. The foundation we'd built was showing cracks, and Marlene's little joke had just revealed how deep they ran. That night, as Marlene slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and did the math. When was the last time we'd been intimate? 3 months? 4? Her boutique had been keeping her busy, she'd said. Late nights doing inventory, weekend trips to fashion shows in Boston. I thought about Chloe, brilliant and beautiful with her dark hair and green eyes that looked nothing like mine or Marlene's. I'd always assumed she'd inherited them from some distant relative. But now, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Kyle, my best friend and former cop. Beer tomorrow? You looked like hell at the hardware store today. I typed back, yeah, I need to ask you about something. The response came immediately. Trouble in paradise? I looked at Marlene's sleeping form, her phone still clutched in her hand like a security blanket. "Something like that," I replied. The next evening, Kyle and I sat in his garage, surrounded by the organized chaos of his retirement project, restoring a 1967 Mustang. He handed me a beer and leaned against his workbench. "So, what's eating you, Grant? And don't say it's nothing. I've known you for 20 years. I took a long pull from the bottle, buying time. Kyle had been a detective for 15 years before his knee gave out. He had a way of seeing through bullshit that made him both the best friend and the most dangerous confidant a guy could have. "Hypothetically," I began, "if someone wanted to run a paternity test without making a big deal about it, how would they go about it?" Kyle's eyebrows shot up. "Hypothetically?" "Hypothetically." He was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "There are home DNA kits. You can order them online, get results in a week or two. All you need is a cheek swab or some hair with the root attached." "And it's accurate?" 99.9%. Same technology the courts use." He paused. "Grant, what's going on?" I told him about Sunday dinner, about Marlene's joke, about the late nights and the constant texting. Kyle listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or taking a sip of his beer. "You think Chloe isn't yours?" The words hit me like a punch to the gut, even though I'd been thinking them for 24 hours. I don't know what to think, but that wasn't a joke yesterday. Marlene was testing the waters, seeing how I'd react. Kyle set down his beer and pulled out his phone. "I can have a kit delivered to my house tomorrow. No paper trail to your address." "You think I'm crazy?" "I think you're a smart man who's noticed some red flags. Better to know the truth than spend the rest of your life wondering." The DNA kit arrived at Kyle's house the next afternoon. It looked innocent enough, a small white box with clinical instructions and 2 cotton swabs. That evening, while Marlene worked late at the boutique, I waited for Chloe to brush her teeth. "Dad?" she called from the bathroom. "Can you grab me a clean towel?" When I brought it to her, she was rinsing her mouth. Her toothbrush sat on the counter, a few strands of her dark hair caught in the bristles. My heart hammered as I palmed the brush. "Thanks, Dad. Hey, are you okay? You've seemed weird since Sunday." I looked at my daughter. Brilliant, kind, everything I'd hoped she'd become. The thought that she might not be mine biologically felt like betrayal, but not of her. Of me. "Just work stress, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." She hugged me, and I breathed in the scent of her shampoo, the same strawberry stuff she'd used since middle school. "I love you, Dad. You know that, right?" "I love you too, Chloe, more than you'll ever know." That night, I carefully extracted the hair from her toothbrush and sealed it in the provided envelope. The second sample was easier. I simply swabbed the inside of my cheek while Marlene showered. Kyle drove the samples to the lab the next morning. "Results in 10 to 14 days, he told me over coffee. "You sure you want to know?" I have to know. If Chloe isn't mine, then everything I thought I knew about my marriage is a lie. And if she is yours? I hadn't considered that possibility. Then I owe my wife an apology and probably need therapy for being paranoid. But deep down, I already knew what the results would show. Marlene's behavior over the past few months suddenly made sense. The secretiveness, the new clothes, the way she'd started working out and coloring her hair. She was trying to impress someone, and it wasn't me. The waiting was torture. I found myself studying Chloe's face at dinner, looking for traces of myself in her features. Her nose was definitely Marlene's, but her jawline, her hands. I'd never noticed how little she resembled me. Meanwhile, Marlene's phone addiction had gotten worse. She'd disappear into the bathroom for 20-minute showers that involved a lot of typing and very little water running. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give vague answers about inventory and customer complaints. "Brenda's been such a help," she'd say. "I don't know what I'd do without her." But when I'd stopped by the boutique to surprise her with lunch last week, Brenda had looked confused. Marlene? She left about an hour ago, said she had errands to run. Her car wasn't in any of the usual places. Not the grocery store, not the bank, not the post office. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air, only to reappear at home 3 hours later with nothing to show for her mysterious errands. On day 12 of waiting, I decided to do some reconnaissance. I told Marlene I was working late, and instead parked across from her boutique at closing time. She emerged at exactly 6 o'clock, locked up, and got into her BMW. But instead of heading home, she drove to the other side of town. I followed at a distance, my engineering mind cataloging every turn, every stop sign. She pulled into the parking lot of the Anchor, a blue-collar bar that catered to construction workers and mechanics. Not exactly Marlene's usual crowd. Through the window, I watched her scan the room before walking directly to a corner booth. A man stood up to greet her. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing work boots and a flannel shirt. He kissed her cheek, and she didn't pull away. Derek Shaw. I knew him by reputation. He ran Shaw Construction, had built half the new developments in town. He was also married with 2 kids and a reputation for chasing anything in a skirt. I sat in my truck for an hour, watching them laugh and touch hands across the table. When they finally left, they walked to their cars separately, but not before another kiss, this one longer and definitely not friendly. The DNA results arrived the next day. Kyle called me at work. "The envelope's here. I'll be right over." I told my assistant I was taking a long lunch and drove to Kyle's house with sweaty palms and a racing heart. He met me at the door with a grim expression. "You want me to open it?" "No, I need to do this." We sat at his kitchen table, the white envelope between us like a loaded gun. My name was printed on the label, along with a reference number that reduced 17 years of fatherhood to a clinical code. I tore it open and unfolded the single sheet of paper. The technical jargon blurred together until I found the line that mattered. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Kyle read over my shoulder. "Jesus, Grant, I'm sorry." The paper shook in my hands. Chloe, my brilliant, beautiful daughter who wanted to be an engineer like her old man, wasn't mine. The late-night talks about college, the proud moments at her science fairs, the dreams I'd had of walking her down the aisle someday, all of it was built on a lie. "What do you want to do?" Kyle asked gently. "I want to burn my house down with Marlene inside it," I said, and I wasn't entirely joking. That's the anger talking. You need a plan. He was right. My engineering training kicked in, overriding the emotional chaos. When a structure fails, you don't just tear it down randomly. You study the failure points, develop a demolition strategy, and execute it systematically. "I need proof of the affair," I said. "Something concrete." "I can help with that. Surveillance isn't my specialty anymore, but I still have contacts." That evening, I sat across from Marlene at dinner, watching her push salad around her plate while texting someone under the table. Chloe was telling us about her calculus test, and Ava was excited about making the junior varsity soccer team. Normal family conversation, except nothing about our family was normal anymore. "Marlene," I said during a lull in the conversation, "put the phone away. Your daughters are trying to talk to you." She looked up with guilty eyes. "Sorry, Brenda's having an issue with a vendor." "At 8 o'clock at night?" "It's a West Coast supplier. Time difference." The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly, I almost believed it myself. Almost. After the girls went upstairs, I confronted her in the kitchen. "We need to talk." She was loading the dishwasher, her back to me. "About what?" "About where you were yesterday evening. About who you're texting. About what's really going on with you." Her shoulders tensed. "I don't know what you mean." "I saw you at the Anchor, Marlene, with Derek Shaw." She spun around, her face cycling through surprise, fear, and finally defiance. "You followed me?" "I was concerned about my wife. Turns out I had good reason to be." "It's not what you think." "Really?" Because what I think is that you're having an affair with a married man, and you've been lying to me about it for months." Tears welled up in her eyes, the same tears that had gotten her out of trouble since we were college sweethearts. "Grant, please, let me explain." "Explain what? How you've been sneaking around behind my back? How you've been lying to our daughters? Or maybe you can explain your little joke about not knowing who the father would be if you were pregnant." The color drained from her face. "That was just... I was being stupid." "Were you? Or were you testing the waters, seeing how I'd react to the idea that one of our children might not be mine?" She sank into a kitchen chair, her composure cracking. "Grant, you don't understand. Things between us have been so difficult lately. We barely talk, we never... I was lonely. So, you decided to have an affair. It just happened. Derek was working on the boutique renovation, and we started talking, and one thing led to another." "How long?" She wiped her eyes with a dish towel. 6 months, but it's over now. I swear to you, it's over." "Is it? Because you were pretty cozy with him last night." "I was telling him it had to end, that I couldn't keep doing this to you, to the girls." I wanted to believe her. After 18 years of marriage, part of me desperately wanted to believe that this was just a mistake, a midlife crisis that we could work through, but the DNA results were burning a hole in my back pocket. "Marlene," I said quietly, "I need you to be completely honest with me about something." She nodded, hope flickering in her eyes. "Is Chloe my daughter?" The question hung in the air, like smoke from a house fire. Marlene's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, panic. "Of course she's your daughter. How can you even ask that?" "Because you've been lying to me for months. Because you made a joke about not knowing who a baby's father would be. Because I've been doing the math and the timeline doesn't add up. Grant, please, you're scaring me." I pulled the DNA results from my pocket and placed them on the table between us. "I already know the answer, Marlene. I just want to hear you say it." She stared at the paper like it was a final verdict. When she finally looked up, her face was streaked with tears and mascara. "It was before we were married," she whispered. "Right before our engagement. We had that big fight about the wedding budget, and I thought you were going to call it off. I went out with some friends, had too much to drink, and what? And I slept with someone. It was one night, Grant. One stupid night, and I regretted it immediately." "Who?" She closed her eyes. "Derek. It was Derek." The kitchen spun around me. Not only had my wife been cheating on me for 6 months, but she'd been cheating on me for 17 years. Chloe, the daughter I'd raised, loved, and been proud of, was the product of a one-night stand with the same man who was currently destroying our marriage. Does he know? No. I never told him. I convinced myself that you were the father, that the timing worked out. I wanted you to be the father. But you knew there was a chance. She nodded miserably. I stood up, my legs shaky. "I need some air." "Grant, wait. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can what, Marlene? Pretend that our entire marriage isn't built on lies? Pretend that every time I look at Chloe, I won't think about you and Derek? She's still your daughter in every way that matters. You raised her. You love her. And that's the only reason Derek Shaw isn't in the hospital right now." I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Marlene sobbing, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I looked at her right then, I might have done something we'd both regret. I drove to Kyle's house and told him everything. He listened without judgment, occasionally refilling my beer and shaking his head. "So what's your play?" he asked when I'd finished. "I don't know. I'm so angry I can barely think straight." "That's understandable. But you need to be smart about this. You've got 2 daughters to think about." "1 daughter," I corrected bitterly. "No, Grant. You've got 2 daughters. Biology doesn't change the fact that you've been Chloe's father for 17 years. She doesn't know about any of this, and she doesn't deserve to be collateral damage. He was right, but it didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. What would you do? I asked. Kyle was quiet for a long moment. I'd make sure Marlene and Derek paid for what they've done, but I'd be surgical about it. No collateral damage, no innocent casualties. Meaning? Meaning you don't just burn it all down. You architect the destruction. Make it hurt where it counts, but keep the girls out of it. I spent the night on Kyle's couch, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. By morning, I had the beginnings of a strategy. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. And justice, I was learning, could be a very satisfying thing. I went home the next morning to find Marlene sitting at the kitchen table with red-rimmed eyes and a cup of untouched coffee. The girls had already left for school, and the house felt hollow, like a building after the tenants had moved out. "Grant," she started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not ready to talk about us yet. But I need to know everything about Derek. How long you've been seeing him, where you meet, who else knows?" She looked confused. "Why?" "Because I need to understand the full scope of what I'm dealing with." She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug like it was an anchor. "We started the affair 6 months ago, when he was renovating the boutique. At first it was just flirting, but then..." "Where do you meet?" "Usually the Anchor, sometimes his office after hours, once or twice at the motel on Route 9. Each detail felt like a small knife wound. Does his wife know?" "I don't think so. He says she's suspicious, but she's always suspicious." "What about Brenda? Does she know?" Marlene nodded reluctantly. "She figured it out a few weeks ago. She's been covering for me, telling people I'm at vendor meetings when I'm really with Derek." So Brenda was complicit. That was useful information. "Anyone else?" "No. We've been very careful. Apparently not careful enough." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from her. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end it with Derek today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. I already told you it was over. And I told you I saw you with him 2 nights ago. So clearly your definition of over and mine are different." She flinched. "Okay, I'll call him." "No, you'll meet him in person, at the Anchor, where this whole thing started. And you'll tell him that if he comes near you or our family again, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The kind that end careers and marriages." That afternoon, I called in sick to work and drove to Derek's construction company. Shaw Construction occupied a small office building on the industrial side of town, with a yard full of equipment and materials. Derek's truck was parked in front, along with several others belonging to his crew. I didn't go inside. Instead, I parked across the street and watched the comings and goings. Derek emerged around 3 o'clock, got into his truck, and drove toward downtown. I followed at a distance, curious about his routine. He stopped at the bank, then the hardware store, then a coffee shop where he spent 20 minutes talking to a blonde woman I didn't recognize. When he finally headed back to his office, I had a better sense of his daily patterns. That evening, Kyle came over for dinner. Marlene was polite but distant, and the girls seemed to sense the tension without understanding it. After they'd gone upstairs, the 3 of us sat in the living room like old friends, except we weren't friends anymore. "So," Kyle said casually, "Derek Shaw. What do you know about him, Marlene?" She shot me a panicked look. "Why are you asking?" "Just curious. Grant mentioned he did some work on your boutique." He's a contractor. He has his own company." "Married?" "Yes." "Kids?" 2, a boy and a girl." Kyle nodded thoughtfully. "Must be doing well for himself. I heard he bought that big house on Lake Minneola last year." "I wouldn't know," Marlene said stiffly. But I could tell she did know. The way her eyes flickered when Kyle mentioned the lake house suggested she'd been there. After Kyle left, I confronted her about it. "You've been to his house." It wasn't a question. "Once," she admitted. "His wife was out of town with the kids. He wanted to show me the renovation work he'd done." "I'm sure that's all he wanted to show you." She didn't deny it. Over the next few days, I began building a comprehensive file on Derek Shaw. Kyle helped, using his old police contacts to pull public records. What we found was interesting. Derek had been married for 15 years to a woman named Linda. They'd had some financial troubles a few years back, liens on their property, late payments on business loans. But recently, things had turned around. The lake house, the new trucks, the expanded business. Either Derek had gotten very good at his job, or he'd found another source of income. "Look at this," Kyle said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. "Shaw Construction has been awarded 3 major municipal contracts in the past year: road work, a new fire station, renovations to the town hall. That's a lot of public money. More than a small company like his usually handles. Makes you wonder how he got the contracts." It made me wonder, too. Municipal contracts were usually awarded through a competitive bidding process, with multiple safeguards to prevent favoritism or corruption. For a relatively small company to win 3 major contracts in 1 year suggested either exceptional luck or exceptional connections. "Who approves these contracts?" I asked. Kyle pulled out another sheet. "The town council, 5 members, including the mayor." I studied the names. 3 of them I recognized, local business owners who'd been on the council for years. The 4th was a newcomer, a real estate developer named Patricia Wells. The 5th name made me do a double-take. "Robert Chen. Isn't he married to the woman who runs the planning office?" "Yeah, Susan Chen. She's the one who reviews all the building permits and zoning applications." The pieces were starting to come together. Derek's sudden financial success, the municipal contracts, the confidence to pursue a married woman despite the risks. He wasn't just a contractor anymore. He was a man with connections, influence, and the kind of power that made him feel untouchable. That was about to change. I decided to confront Derek directly, but not at his office or the Anchor. I wanted neutral ground, somewhere public enough to prevent violence but private enough for an honest conversation. I chose the town park, specifically the walking trail that circled the pond. It was a place where 2 men could have a conversation without attracting attention. I called his office and asked to speak with him about a potential job, a deck renovation at my house. We arranged to meet at the park Saturday morning to discuss the project. Derek was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench overlooking the water. He was bigger than I'd realized, at least 6'2", with the kind of build that came from years of physical labor. But I wasn't intimidated. I'd been lifting weights and running since college, and more importantly, I had the advantage of knowing why we were really there. "Grant Willis?" he said, standing up and extending his hand. "Derek Shaw. Thanks for meeting me here. I like to see the neighborhood before I take on a project." I shook his hand, studying his face. This was the man who'd slept with my wife 17 years ago and fathered the daughter I'd raised. This was the man who'd been sneaking around with Marlene for 6 months, destroying my marriage one lie at a time. "Actually, Derek, I don't need a deck built." His smile faltered slightly. "Oh? I know about you and my wife." The transformation was immediate. His friendly contractor persona evaporated, replaced by something harder and more calculating. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said carefully. "No misunderstanding. I saw you with Marlene at the Anchor. I know about the affair." Derek looked around the park, checking for witnesses. There were a few joggers on the far side of the pond, but no one within earshot. "Look, Grant, I don't know what Marlene told you, but she told me everything. The 6-month affair, the meetings at your office, the trips to your lake house when your wife was out of town." His jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay away from my family." "And if I don't?" The question hung in the air between us. This was the moment where things could go in several directions. I could threaten him physically, but that would make me the aggressor. I could threaten to tell his wife, but that was predictable. Instead, I decided to show him that I knew more than he thought. Tell me about the municipal contracts, Derek. 3 major projects in 1 year. That's quite a streak of luck. His face went pale. What are you talking about? Shaw Construction, road work on Maple Street, the new fire station, the town hall renovations, almost $2 million in public contracts. I'm curious how a small company like yours beat out the bigger firms. We submitted competitive bids. I'm sure you did. I'm also sure that having friends on the town council doesn't hurt. Robert Chen, for instance. His wife Susan handles building permits and zoning applications. I bet she's been very helpful to your business. Derek's hands clenched into fists. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? See, Derek, I'm a civil engineer. I understand how municipal contracting works, how permits get approved, how zoning variances get granted, and I understand how easy it would be for someone with the right connections to game the system. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the situation. You've built your recent success on relationships and favors. Those relationships are fragile. 1 phone call to the State Ethics Commission, 1 audit of your contracts, 1 investigation into your permit approvals, and your house of cards comes tumbling down. Derek stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his aftershave and see the anger in his eyes. You think you can intimidate me? You think I'm afraid of some pencil-pushing engineer? I think you're a smart businessman who understands risk and reward. The question is my wife worth losing everything you've built? For a moment, I thought he might take a swing at me. His whole body was coiled like a spring, and I could see him weighing his options. But Derek hadn't gotten where he was by making stupid decisions in public places. This conversation is over, he said finally. Yes, it is. And so is your relationship with Marlene. He walked away without another word, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands remained clenched at his sides. I'd gotten under his skin, made him understand that I wasn't just a cuckolded husband who could be ignored or intimidated, but I'd also declared war. That evening, Marlene was more agitated than usual. She kept checking her phone, pacing around the house, starting conversations, and then trailing off mid-sentence. Did you talk to Derek today? I asked over dinner. She nearly choked on her water. Why would you ask that? Because you're acting like someone who's waiting for a phone call that isn't coming. Chloe and Ava exchanged glances. The tension in our house had become impossible to ignore, and I could see them trying to figure out what was wrong. I'm fine, Marlene said. Just tired. But she wasn't fine. After dinner, she disappeared into the bathroom with her phone for 30 minutes. When she came out, her eyes were red and her jaw was set in the stubborn line I'd learned to recognize over 18 years of marriage. We need to talk, she said. We went into the living room and closed the door. Marlene sat on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. Derek called me, she said. He told me about your conversation. Did he? He's angry, Grant. Really angry. He thinks you're trying to destroy his business. I'm trying to protect my family. By threatening him? By making him understand that actions have consequences. Marlene stood up and began pacing. You don't understand. Derek isn't the kind of man you want as an enemy. He has connections, influence. He could make things very difficult for you. Let him try. Grant, please, just let this go. I've ended things with him. It's over. Is it? Because he doesn't seem to think so. She stopped pacing and looked at me with something that might have been fear. What do you mean? I mean that Derek Shaw is used to getting what he wants. He's used to using his connections and his influence to solve problems. And right now, I'm his biggest problem. So what are you saying? I'm saying that this is far from over. Derek made a choice when he decided to sleep with my wife. Now he has to live with the consequences. That night, I lay awake planning my next move. Derek had shown his hand by calling Marlene after our confrontation. He was rattled, which meant he was vulnerable. But he was also dangerous, and I needed to be careful. Kyle had been right about being surgical. This wasn't about burning everything down. It was about precision strikes that would hurt Derek where it mattered most while keeping my family safe. The first strike would target his business relationships. The second would target his reputation. And the third would depend on how smart Derek was about knowing when he was beaten. But something told me Derek Shaw wasn't the type to go down without a fight. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Susan Chen, the town's planning director, knocked on my door with a manila folder in her hands and worry lines creasing her forehead. "Grant, do you have a minute? I need to run something by you." Susan and I had worked together on several municipal projects over the years. She was thorough, professional, and had a reputation for being absolutely incorruptible, which made her connection to Derek Shaw all the more interesting. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She sat down and opened the folder. "I've been reviewing some recent permit applications, and I'm seeing some irregularities. Normally I'd handle this internally, but given your background in municipal engineering, I thought you might have some insights." She spread several documents across my desk. They were building permits for Shaw construction projects, each one stamped with approval dates and signatures. "What kind of irregularities?" "Timeline issues, mostly. These permits were approved unusually quickly, sometimes within days of application. The normal review process takes 2 to 3 weeks minimum." I studied the documents, noting the dates and approval signatures. "Who signed off on these?" "That's the strange part. Most of them were approved during periods when I was out of the office. Vacation days, sick leave, that conference in Albany last month. My deputy, Maria Santos, signed them in my absence." "Is that unusual?" "Not necessarily. Maria has signing authority when I'm unavailable, but she's supposed to follow the same review procedures I do, and these approvals happen too quickly for proper review." Susan pointed to one permit in particular. "This one bothers me the most. It's for a zoning variance that should have required a public hearing. Instead, it was approved administratively as a minor modification." I recognized the address. It was Derek's lake house. The permit was for an addition that would have required setback variances and environmental review due to its proximity to the water. "Have you talked to Maria about this?" "That's the problem. Maria says she doesn't remember signing these permits. She thinks someone may have used her signature stamp without authorization." The implications were staggering. If someone had been forging permit approvals, it wasn't just unethical. It was criminal fraud. "What do you want to do about it?" Susan closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. "I need to report this to the town manager, but I wanted to get your opinion first. Do you think I'm overreacting?" "Not at all. If permits are being approved without proper review, it's a serious safety issue. Buildings could be constructed that don't meet code requirements. That's what I'm afraid of. Grant, can I ask you to keep this confidential for now? Until I figure out exactly what's happening?" "Of course." After Susan left, I sat staring at the closed door, my mind racing. Derek's municipal contracts, his rapid permit approvals, his confidence in threatening me. It was all starting to make sense. He hadn't just been lucky or well-connected. He'd been cheating the system, possibly with help from inside the planning office. But who was helping him? And how deep did the corruption go? I called Kyle and asked him to meet me for lunch. We sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Deli, away from the usual crowd of town employees and contractors. "Susan Chen came to see me today," I told him, keeping my voice low. "She thinks someone's been forging permit approvals for Derek's projects." Kyle's eyebrows went up. "That's a felony." "It gets better. The permits were approved using her deputy's signature stamp, but the deputy doesn't remember signing them." "Inside job?" "Has to be. Someone with access to the planning office. someone who knows Susan's schedule and when she'll be out. Kyle pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. I've got a friend in the state attorney general's office, public corruption unit. You want me to make a call? Not yet. I want to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with first. What do you mean? I mean, Derek didn't do this alone. He's got help, and I want to know who's helping him before we blow the whistle. That afternoon, I drove past Derek's office and noticed his truck was gone. On impulse, I pulled into the parking lot and walked into the building. The receptionist, a young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings, looked up from her computer. Can I help you? I'm here to see Derek Shaw. We had an appointment to discuss a project. Mr. Shaw's out on a job site. He should be back around 4. That's fine. I'll wait. I sat in the small waiting area and pretended to read a magazine while listening to the office chatter. The receptionist was on the phone with a supplier discussing delivery schedules. A project manager was reviewing blueprints at a nearby desk. Everything seemed normal, professional. But then I heard something interesting. Maria called, the receptionist said to the project manager. She wants to know if we need any rush permits this week. The project manager looked up from his blueprints. Tell her we're good for now. The Riverside project permits came through faster than expected. Derek's got the magic touch with the planning office, the receptionist laughed. I don't know how he does it. Better not to ask, the project manager replied, but he was smiling. I left before Derek returned, but I'd heard enough. Maria Santos, Susan Chen's deputy, was apparently taking calls from Shaw Construction about rush permits. That wasn't standard procedure. Contractors were supposed to work directly with the planning office, not individual employees. That evening, I did some research on Maria Santos. She'd been with the town for 8 years, had a clean personnel record, and lived in a modest apartment on the east side. But according to the property records Kyle had helped me access, she'd recently purchased a new car, a BMW that cost more than her annual salary. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed more evidence before making any accusations. Fortunately, I had an idea about how to get it. The next morning, I called Derek's office and asked to speak with him about a potential project. This time, a genuine one. I told the receptionist I was thinking about adding a workshop to my property and needed permits for electrical and plumbing work. Derek called me back within an hour. Grant, I thought we had an understanding. We do, but this is business. I need permits for a workshop addition, and I hear you're very good at getting permits approved quickly. There was a long pause. What kind of timeline are you looking at? I'd like to break ground next month. Is that possible? Depends on the complexity of the work. Why don't you bring me the plans, and I'll take a look. We arranged to meet at his office the next day. I spent that evening drawing up legitimate plans for a workshop addition, nothing fancy, just a basic structure that would require standard permits. But I also included one element that would require a variance, a small bathroom that would push the building closer to the property line than zoning allowed. The next afternoon, I sat across from Derek in his office while he reviewed my plans. He was professional, courteous, and gave no indication that we'd had a confrontation in the park just days earlier. This looks straightforward, he said, except for this bathroom placement. You'll need a setback variance for this. How long does that usually take? Normally? 6 to 8 weeks, including the public hearing process. That's longer than I hoped. Is there any way to expedite it? Derek leaned back in his chair, studying my face. There might be. I have good relationships with the planning office. Sometimes things can be processed as administrative approvals if they're minor enough. Would this qualify? I think so, for the right price. There it was, the offer of corruption, delivered with a smile and a handshake. I kept my expression neutral. What kind of price are we talking about? My standard fee, plus a small administrative cost to ensure proper handling. How small? 5,000. Cash. I pretended to consider it. And you guarantee the variance will be approved? I guarantee it will be processed quickly and favorably. When would you need the money? Half up front, half when the permits are issued. I shook his hand. Deal. I'll bring you a check tomorrow. But I wasn't bringing Derek Shaw a check. I was bringing him something much more valuable, enough rope to hang himself with. That evening, I called Kyle and told him about the conversation. "You've got him," Kyle said. "Solicitation of a bribe, conspiracy to commit fraud. That's serious prison time. I want to record our next conversation. Can you help me with that? I can get you a wire, but Grant, you need to be careful. If Derek figures out what you're doing, he won't. He thinks he's got me over a barrel because of Marlene. He thinks I need him more than he needs me." "And you're willing to bet your life on that?" I thought about Chloe, about the 17 years I'd spent raising another man's daughter while he lived his life without consequences. I thought about Marlene, about the lies and the betrayal and the casual way she'd destroyed our marriage. "Yeah," I said. "I'm willing to bet my life on that."